Andrewa, I think it ended up only being one game with what they perceived to be the full roster coming out of training camp, and yeah, I can't think of another like it. I guess the only good part was that almost all of the injuries, JV's surgery being the outlier, were short-term and could be worked around. But yeah, been a crazy trip to 43-16 in many ways. Hi. With the news about Jeremy Lin and his post on Instagram, I'm curious to know how these buyouts and new deals come about. If teams aren't allowed to tamper, I assume that the Raps couldn't have contacted Lin's agent to let him know they were interested. So, does Lin start negotiating a buyout and then his agent puts the word out that he'll be available? At that point, can any team try to make a deal? Theoretically, he would still be an Atlanta player, so I wonder about the timing on how these things work. Thanks for all you do, keeping us in the know. Smiley face. Sports Chica. Not being allowed to tamper and not tampering are two entirely different things. There are always back channels and ways around it, and every team does it. A player generally says to an agent, look, if you can get me out, I'd be okay with going to Team A or Team B, and if they've got an interest, let's see what we can do. The agent might call a friend who knows a friend who presents a hypothetical to someone on the organizational chart of Team A or B, and the process begins. It's kind of honor among thieves, I guess. And no one can, officially, make a deal until the paperwork of waiving a player is done. Unofficial deals happen days before, as we saw firsthand with Lin. Hi Doug. A few observations and comments. Og has obviously not had the season he would have hoped for, and I am sure his personal issues are the primary reason. However, last year he played small forward and this year primarily power forward. Perhaps moving him back would help. I am intrigued that Masai once again felt it necessary to discuss his relationship with Kyle Lowry. Will the old adage, where there's smoke there's fire, apply? Even though Lowry's contract is not up until the end of next season, one would not be shocked if he is gone before then. Finally, a business acquaintance in Atlanta told me the other day that there are rumors that Dewayne Dedmon might get bought out. If that is the case, I thought he would be of interest to the Raptors, assuming of course he would be willing to play behind Gasol and Ibaka. Stanga, I wouldn't be shocked in the least if Lowry is dealt in the summer. Not in the least. But that would be because it is a good deal at the time. The conversation they had before the trade deadline was just a boss chatting with a key employee about possibilities and letting said employee know what was real and what was internet fake. I have no clue whether Dewayne Dedmon will become available. I would be mildly surprised if he did, but please, ask yourself this question. Why would a 29-year-old going into a free agent year who needs to re-establish himself come to a team where he would be, at the very best, the third big and more likely fourth or fifth in the rotation and would seldom play? Makes no sense from his angle. In your February 13th piece, you expressed the opinion that the players were somehow benefiting from the buyout opportunities and doing clubs a disservice by asking for buyouts. I suggest this is exactly what the big market, big pocket teams wanted, and that is why it is allowed. Let's not forget the league put this in place with the salary cap. Large market, big-pocketed owners wanted unfettered ability to spend money to buy championship teams. Small and mid-size market teams wanted the cap to have a chance to field a competitive team. So the league went with a compromise. A salary cap to somewhat limit costs but outs for teams with deep pocket owners to buy players they couldn't get under the typical cap to chase championships, and longer contract options for current teams over prospective teams. If it were really such a benefit for the players, every player on an expiring contract would be seeking a buyout, and they are not. If the league really wanted to level the playing field, they'd go to a hard cap, but they don't. It is all an illusion. Murray Raya, let me ask you a question first. If it is what the big market, big pocket teams wanted, why don't players go to big market, big pocket teams? Seems a flaw in your logic right off the bat. There's no question there are flaws in the system that have to be addressed in collective bargaining. I agree and have said that. And there's no question there are benefits to some players. Hard cap, ain't coming. put it out of your mind. Q. Hi Doug, longtime reader of your columns, so glad to have you back and hope you're taking care of yourself. I watched the interview with Nurse where he was asked about all the ex-Raptors playing in the Spurs-Grizzlies game and was curious about his comment that it was interesting, and then I read somewhere that he couldn't say much or run afoul of tampering guidelines. I'm confused as I don't see how commenting on the game or players in it would constitute tampering, unless he were to say he hoped to see them back in a Raptors uniform someday. Love to hear your perspective on this. Thanks, Janetia. I'm doing well, thanks. Taking care as best I can, but it's getting to be that time of year, so we'll see. I was in that scrum and I think Nick was being a bit facetious and extra careful, but will all the Lakers, Sixers, Ben Simmons shenanigans and Lakers, Celtics, Pelican Anthony Davis shenanigans and whatever the Knicks are doing, extra caution may be wise. Just commenting on guys he knows and has coached is no big deal, but being careful was kind of funny. Q. Hey Doug, one thing I hate in the NBA is players arguing calls, whether they're right or wrong. Now I'm not blind to the fact that officials in the NBA have a hard job and for the most part do a great job, but with the extensive replay angles, broadcast commentating, and basic basketball knowledge, it's hard to not get frustrated as a fan. Has arguing calls always been in basketball culture? Other sports officials, rugby is a good example, would never tolerate it. Speaking of tolerating things, if I get told how to make butter in a Snickers commercial one more time I'm going to lose it, and I know I'm not the only one. In my opinion there are some awful haircuts in the NBA, and maybe one or two on the Raptors, but I won't name names. Who do you remember as having the worst haircut in Raptor NBA history? As always, thanks for the awesome content. Justin Leslie Valea, hair. All time? Man, I don't know. Half the Orlando team from a couple of years back, with the guy with the floppy butt hanging in front of his eyes would be a recent example, so would Birdman Anderson and, yeah, so would Jeremy Lin back in the day. Raptors. A few. I remember Mo Pete showing up with cornrows and someone suggesting he looked like Marion Jones, and he did, and Oak used to have these twisty things that were quite something. AC Earl had some hirsute looks that were quite something, too. The arguing thing? I agree it gets out of hand sometimes, but I also think there are circumstances unique to basketball that make it more obvious. It's a perfect TV game, so you have 10 cameras and 10 players and everything is obvious and caught. I guarantee there are as many discussions between players in the pucks and football and baseball, but viewers don't see or hear them. If you don't think helmet-clad hockey or football player climb all over officials, or that catchers and hitters and pitchers and coaches don't let UMPS know about their displeasure, you're wrong. It's just done out of eye and ear sight. And, yeah, at times it's unbecoming, but it's part of the game. Q. The Nets game, you're right, there were moments. But we trailed most of the game. We missed shots. We missed shots that resulted in kick Brooklyn baskets. We made very, very bad passes consistently. Often the shooting was horrendous, barely getting the rim. Shooters went cold several times in the game. We surrendered an 8-point lead very late in the game and were suddenly trailing by 3, trailing to a mediocre team. Again, we allowed way too many points. The play was scrambly. Pulling it out in the last 5 seconds against the Nets at home isn't exactly a great endorsement of their play. There were certainly moments of individual excellence, defensively and offensively. There were moments, certainly not even quarters. You've picked a bunch of those moments out. We seem to be built on individually excellent moments, and not team chemistry. Although Lowry congratulated Leonard on the final bucket, that was nice to see. It just seems like very different basketball than last year, which was so much about team chemistry. On both units, the bench mob, so celebrated and cherished last year as our secret weapon, is now permanently demolished. Pirtle with the Spurs, Wright and Miles with Memphis, Siakam on the first unit, and only FVV remaining, albeit injured right now. My question, sorry for always being long-winded, the flaws of the last 30 games are glaring to me. Is this just the hypersensitivity of a fan? 30 games and I thought we could hold our own against the Warriors in the playoffs. Now I fear one of our infamous collapses, hoping for a hypersensitive diagnosis. Gasol is great, of course, this goes without saying, but I won't forget JV though. He was my man. DD too. Amir too. That's not changing. Even if I want their teams to lose, I couldn't have traded any of them. Jeff VA, hypersensitive doesn't even begin to describe it. Let me lay out some actual facts on that Brooklyn game. The Raptors shot 54.3% from the field, far above their average. They're 9 for 31 from 3, about 2 makes below their average without VanVleet, one of their best three-point shooters. They committed 14 turnovers, which is about their season average. They never trailed by more than 8 points, and the Nets shot out of their minds and have been one of the hottest teams in the NBA since December. You really need to relax. Would you trade Jakob Poeltl, DeMar DeRozan, CJ Miles and DeLon Wright for Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, Marc Gasol and Jeremy Lin? I sure the hell would, and I'd toss in Jonas Valanciunas as a sweetener, and I think you know how I feel about DeMar and JV, so, chill. Or at least wait a few hours before hitting send. Q. Hey Doug, it seems we are at that stretch of the season where the Raps know they are likely to be a top 2 seed, and working on improvements and staying healthy is more important than getting the number 1 seed or chasing 60 wins. To me, this is the most talented team we have had going into the playoffs, and if we can find a way for Kawhi and the other starters to truly gel on the floor, we might just find ourselves in the franchise's first finals. The million-dollar question is, what can Nick Nurse do to improve the interplay between Kawhi and the starters without compromising what they each bring to the team? We have a soft enough schedule to allow coaches and players to focus on this, and Kawhi is just too talented for this not to be possible. But I'm not smart enough to know how they might do it. Keep up the good work. Arnie, London, UKA. I get that part of the narrative as Kyle and Kawhi and how the starters mesh, but I really think it's overblown. Sure, there could be more crisp and quick ball movement, and Leonard could maybe involve his teammates more, but his assist totals are up, the team assist totals are fine, and, frankly, they win. I agree that more time on the court will be better for all to take more advantage of individual skills and the nuances of team play, and hopefully they get it. But I honestly don't see it as a regular issue as much as others do. Q. Just a comment, no question. Family Day may be silly and contrived, but I'll wager having a long weekend in the middle of winter is appreciated by more people than 99.9% of the usual garbage that's issued out of the Ontario government, even buck a beer that isn't. Have a restful all-star break and really enjoy your blog. Thanks Charlia, I stand by my assertion that it's a silly and contrived holiday, but agree 1,000,000,000% with your point. Q. Hi Dougie, thought I saw that Ben McLemore had been signed off a buyout by the Raptors. Is this true? Jonathan in New Hampshire, you did see it, it was on the magical Twitter machine last Saturday and was dead wrong. It was one of those odd situations where I did nothing with the original report and then found out it was bogus, so I felt no need to correct something I hadn't ever reported, or even retweeted. Q. Hey Doug, I saw that you referred to what I assume was Mickey's Pizza in an earlier blog post. I absolutely love their pizza. We live in North Hazelville, so we probably only order out from them once or twice a year, but it's probably a good thing we live a good distance away from the place. I've never been to Chicago to have real Chicago deep dish, so I can't compare, but this is my favorite pizza in the GTA. Just thought I would give you some feedback, if you haven't got some already. Glad to hear you're not overexerting yourself either. Happy eats and enjoy the All-Star weekend. Christiana at Mickey's, for sure. And I have to get there very soon. I'm in Southwest Hazelville, so it's like a home game for me. And by the time you read this, perhaps Saturday dinner will have been taken care of. Chicago deep dish pizza is okay, not exactly my favorite, but certainly worth it every now and then. Q. Hello Doug, and Baseball Steve, hope you're over your crappy cold, and that it doesn't evolve into the even crappier flu. And between the flu and this week's weather, my Valentine's Day plans of donning a LBD and sipping cocktails in a swanky spot were replaced by slurping chicken noodle soup straight out of the saucepan over the stove while wearing sweats that might have been washed this week. Maybe. Well, certainly this month, I'm sure. So, not to be overly graphic, but sinus congestion affected my hearing while I was trying to catch your conversation with Richard Deitch on The Fan early in the week. In particular during the time when you and he were discussing the Lakers' recent inability to sign players, and Mr. Deitch referred to LA showing an organizational hubris. I think I understand what he meant by that, but could you expand on a hubris being applied to a sports franchise? Are there other teams, in other sports, who might be said to have this same affliction, either past or present? And what's the cure? Like your suggestion to include WNBA players in the All-Star hoopla can only help. And is that event you mentioned in the blog that sounds remotely enjoyable, the brunch, televised? Sorry if this is incoherent, but between the cold meds and Trump presently and idiotically declaring a national emergency, there are certain challenges being experienced here. One of, okay, the only positive thing about being under the weather for me is more time spent reading, and I enthusiastically recommend Cathal Kelly's memoir, Boy Wonders. It was a lovely trip back to the 70s and 80s, and just generally about enduring those difficult, frustrating, confusing years when you're bridging childhood and adulthood. And of course Cathal's journey was insightful and hilarious and poignant. And hilarious. Are you familiar with his story of standing in line to see The Empire Strikes Back and the man in the brown van? Thanks for the Miller Lite mention, and of course whenever one thinks of Bob Uecker it's the phrase, "just a bit outside," that comes to mind. So, thinking about baseball, and who isn't this time of year, what are you and Steve looking forward to this season? Now that what Shapiro and Atkins inherited is basically, totally, gone, this is their team. What manner of team and season do you think it will be? Finally, and sorry for the length of this, did you see Kawhi's shred? I thought it was brilliant. Being true to oneself matters. Take care of yourself, and pleased to hear you are avoiding BASG and weekend. What a week. Lori P.A., I would absolutely put the Knicks, who have been atrocious forever, in the organizational hubris category with the Lakers that Richard was talking about. In the grand scheme of relevance, they have been nowhere for years yet seem to think they have things to offer. No. Not sure I can go with others because those two stand out so far. I know the Legends Brunch is always televised by NBA TV. I would certainly hope NBA TV Canada picks it up, but I do not know. Baseball Steve and I are in agreement that the Blue Jays will be awful, that they have to trade Stroman sooner rather later to change a clubhouse dynamic, and, yeah, Vladdy's good but he's also pudgy, and the organization is ripping off fans by not having him on the opening day roster to save money in 6 or 7 years. So we're gonna work on our golf games this summer rather than worry about the hometown 9. The Leonard ad is priceless. I care not a whit about the shoes, but the ad was outstanding. Q. Hi Doug. In Bruce Arthur's piece on Jeremy Lin's arrival, first game he mentioned attending chapel pre-game. Can you go more in depth on what's that about? Is there a room for that within the arena, or do they carve out a corner somewhere? Do all teams have that option? Thanks. Jeffrey Greena, sure. Every team in every sport that I've ever covered, and that includes basketball, baseball, football regularly, and I cannot speak to the Pucks but I presume it's the same, has a pre-game chapel service available to players from each team. It's non-denominational, open to all, and is a half hour or so of chat and fellowship and study. Some players take advantage, some don't. It's generally held in either an empty dressing room or a blocked-off area in the back of the arena or stadium. It's certainly not fancy. It is now basic standard operating procedure for professional athletes. Q. Hi Doug, the more things change, the more things stay the same, don't get me wrong. I'm loving this season, but with an eye towards the future of the franchise, I find it almost comical that 18 years on, another Doc Rivers-led team that is surprising the league in a near playoff spot gives up on the best player on the roster, Harris, now in trade, Ben Wallace, back then to free agency, to attempt to sign 2 max free agents. One of them a superstar from the Toronto Raptors. What does Doc have against us? Doesn't he remember it didn't work back then? Cheers, Fergia. Lovely analogy, except Doc isn't running the Clippers anymore. That's Lawrence Frank with Steve Ballmer. Interesting take nonetheless. Q. Sir, in the U.S., there are 125 Division I FB teams, but 347 D1 BB squads, very big schools competing with much smaller ones. With this in mind, do you think U Sports Basketball should open up its ranks to any college that wants to compete with them? In this case, is the more the merrier or keep it as it is? Paul M.A. Do you mean U Sports ingesting schools like Humber, Sheridan and the University of Welland, greatest college ever? Can't see any need to. I don't think there's the depth of talent needed. I think each plays at its own level and with its own goals, and there'd be nothing to be gained by amalgamating. But go Knights. Q. Hello Doug. I recently introduced Airplane, the movie, to the kids, and to my surprise they enjoyed it. I've seen that movie so many times I laugh a few seconds before the gags happen. I hadn't seen it in a while and I completely forgot about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's cameo. It's brilliant. Who in your mind from the Raptors could pull that off? I think Siakam would be pure comedy gold, and I also think Lowry could pull it off. I'd also love to see Leonard deadpan that role. I think that would be hilarious given his personality. Shirley, smiling face with smiling eyes. You can share your thoughts. Santinoa, current Raptors. You may find this hard to believe, but I think if you want subtlety and excellent deadpan delivery, oh geez your guy. Q. Hey Doug, well the All-Star break is upon us and our heroes are winning and playing pretty good. Can't wait to see a fully healthy and integrated squad. Gasol and Lin are going to really pay off down the stretch and in the playoffs. I think there may be one more significant addition. My spider senses tell me Pau Gasol is gonna get bought out and join his brother into for the stretch drive. You hearing whispers? Let speculation run wild. Some rapid fire for you. Which Raptor player will surprise the most after the All-Star break? Will Siakam win Most Improved Player? How many homers will Vladdy hit this year? Favorite Griff story? Keep up the terrific reporting. Really enjoy your work in all media and continued good health. E.P. Richmond Hilla. If those are your spidey senses, they're from a dangerous tarantula that will kill you, so run. I'd suggest the only way Pau gets to Toronto is to visit his brother. Our Friday with the Spurs. Yes. Will depend how long Blue Jays ownership rips off its fans by leaving him in minors. He'll average 2.5 per weeks for how many weeks they decide to let him play. Out of respect for Griff, my absolute best stories cannot be told here. I did sit next to him and watch him work, and worked with him the night of the Bartman game at Wrigley. A true pro in action. Then we had a couple. That's how every good Griff tale ends. Then we had a couple. Q. Hi Doug. Appreciate everything you do. I'm not usually one for conspiracy theories, and I suspect you're not either, but I'm gonna ask for your help resolving what I feel is an important NBA-related conspiracy that I think has gone unnoticed. I'm sure with the extra time you've had watching away games on the tube this season, you've undoubtedly seen the NBA commercial on dunks versus threes. Every time I see the commercial, I'm struck by the voice of the clown being dropped in the dunk tank, which to me sounds exactly like that of a certain head of state. Given the animosity between numerous NBA personalities and the U.S. president during the past few years, is it merely a coincidence that the clown getting dropped in the dunk tank sounds like Mr. Trump? Or is this a veiled insult, inside joke among NBA insiders? I figured the All-Star break, which is full of so many threes and dunks, would be the perfect time to ask for your help. Even though you are not attending, I'm hoping you can put your vast network of NBA contacts to work and settle this vast conspiracy once and for all. Thanks. Tim, Calgary. P.S. I will interpret a classic snarky Smith response as affirmation of this theory. Dude. This is all world conspiracy theorism. Well done. Gotta tell you, though, it's so subtle and so crazy that, what the heck, why wouldn't it be true? I'm dead certain it isn't, but I bet lots of irregulars will listen more closely. So you've served a public service. Q. Have you heard about this? Any way you slice it, this is quite the feat, even in a high school game. If memory serves, Greg DeVries, referenced in the story, starred for the University of Alberta in a couple of CIAU national tournaments back in the mid-90s. https skeptical smiley face, vancouver-sun.com/sports/basketball-oak-bay-high-school-basketball-player-score-record-96-points-and-a-game. Enjoy your all-star downtime. James 8 Victoria, very cool. I believe it was Denham Brown who once had 100 in a Toronto high school game. And, yeah, I remember the name Greg DeVries for sure. Q. Dear faithful scribe. Hope you have been having some good stool time today with convivial company and tasty cold refreshment. Found myself having time from grandchild sitting on Wednesday night and stumped my way downtown to the game. With the walking boot cast protecting the Achilles, I gained some appreciation for those with impediments for getting around the subway and the maze at Union Station. Tried to get some sympathy from the free enterprisers who handled the tickets, didn't work. Thought I fell in a time machine, was pleased to watch the OG from last year and the Pascal from some advanced dimension. I was left wondering if they will have a place for that guy who is on load management. After the game, dropped in for some music and that stimulated this question. Have always been in awe of those great jazz and blues musicians who can sit in with an entirely new group and fit in to make some great music. Thoughlin was like that on his first game with no real practice time. He seemed to sit in with his new group and look good, and in some cases even made them look better. How much of that is a reflection of a high basketball IQ? Do you think that an equally physically skilled point guard would be able to do much the same, or does he operate on a somewhat higher standard? All the best, Bill W. Chithama. If you were in the hood of the arena, hope you went to the Senator if jazz, blues was your thing. Lin's debut, and Gasol's for that matter, were successful in large part because they are smart basketball players. They are able to process verbal information into physical action, because of the experiences they've had, but also because of the way the Raptors and coaches tone down the subtleties of what they do to make it easier. But even that wouldn't have worked if Lin and Gasol weren't bright enough to absorb moments on the court and quickly react to them.